X-Men Origins. Wolverine is a superhero action film released by 20th Century Fox, serving as the fourth installment in the X-Men film franchise and the very first spin-off dedicated entirely to one character, Wolverine, played by Hugh Jackman. The film was directed by Gavin Hood, a South African filmmaker known for his earlier work on Tsotsi, which had earned him international acclaim including an Academy Award. This movie was produced in the United States and financed by 20th Century Fox, one of the major Hollywood studios responsible for bringing the X-Men comic book universe to the big screen. The screenplay was written by David Benioff, who would later become widely known for co-creating Game of Thrones, along with Skip Woods. The story draws inspiration from Marvel Comics, particularly focusing on the backstory of Wolverine, also known as Logan or James Howlett, exploring his origins long before the events of the original X-Men trilogy. The film aimed to explain how Wolverine became the clawed, nearly indestructible mutant audiences had already come to love, delving into his troubled past, his complicated relationship with his half-brother Victor Creed who later becomes Sabretooth, and the painful experiments that gave him his adamantium skeleton. The tone of the film blends superhero action with themes of betrayal, vengeance, brotherhood, and the search for identity, making it much more personal and emotionally driven compared to the ensemble-based X-Men films that came before it. The plot of X-Men Origins. Wolverine begins in the 19th century, showing young James Howlett as a sickly child living in Canada, who discovers his mutant ability of retractable bone claws after witnessing a tragic and violent incident at his family home, which reveals shocking truths about his real father. Alongside his half-brother Victor Creed, James flees home and the film transitions into a memorable montage that sweeps through more than a century of history, showing the two brothers fighting side by side in numerous major wars including the American Civil War, World War I, and World War II, as well as the Vietnam War. All while their powers keep them alive and their bond keeps deepening despite Victor's increasingly violent and uncontrollable nature. Eventually, after committing a serious act of violence during the Vietnam War, both brothers are arrested and sentenced to execution by firing squad, but their mutant healing abilities allow them to survive completely unharmed. This event catches the attention of William Stryker, a military colonel who recruits them into a secret Black Ops team of mutants called Team X, which includes other mutants such as Wade Wilson, John Wraith, Fred Dukes, Chris Bradley, and Agent Zero. During a mission that Logan finds morally unacceptable due to its brutal treatment of civilians, he decides to leave the team, disturbed by Victor's growing bloodlust and Stryker's ruthless methods. Logan then chooses to live a peaceful life in the Canadian Rockies working as a logger, and he falls in love with a schoolteacher named Kayla Silverfox. Their peaceful life is shattered when Victor begins hunting down and killing former members of Team X one by one, eventually attacking Kayla, whose apparent death devastates Logan and pushes him toward revenge. Stryker approaches Logan again, this time offering him a chance to gain nearly indestructible power through a secret experimental program known as Weapon X, which involves bonding the indestructible metal adamantium to his skeleton. Grieving and enraged, Logan agrees to the procedure, undergoes immense pain during the surgery, and emerges with an adamantium-laced skeleton and truly unbreakable claws, but he escapes the facility after learning that Stryker's true intentions involve creating a weaponized mutant army and erasing his memories. As the story continues, Logan, now going by the name Wolverine, discovers that Kayla Silverfox is actually alive and that her apparent death was part of a manipulation orchestrated by Stryker to convince Logan to undergo the adamantium procedure. Wolverine also crosses paths with young mutants including Scott Summers, who later becomes Cyclops, and gradually uncovers the horrifying truth about Stryker's plans to create the ultimate weapon by fusing multiple mutant abilities into a single being. This culminates in the creation of Weapon 11, a monstrous mutant later identified in fan discussions as an early cinematic version of Deadpool, formed from Wade Wilson's body combined with the powers of several other mutants, including optic blasts, teleportation, and regeneration abilities. The film's climax takes place at a nuclear power facility, where Wolverine, Victor Creed, and Kayla must confront Weapon 11 in a chaotic and destructive battle. During the fight, Victor and Logan set aside their rivalry temporarily to fight the monstrous creation together, showcasing a brief return of brotherly loyalty despite everything that has happened between them. After the enemy is ultimately defeated, Kayla sacrifices herself while protecting Logan from Stryker, who then shoots Logan in the head with an adamantium bullet in an attempt to erase his memory completely, since regular bullets cannot harm him. The film ends with Logan surviving but suffering total memory loss, setting up the emotional and narrative foundation that connects to his appearance in the original X-Men trilogy, where he first appears with no memory of his past. The cast of X-Men Origins. Wolverine is led by Hugh Jackman in the role of Logan, also known as Wolverine, a performance that had already gained massive popularity through his portrayal of the character in the earlier X-Men films, and this movie allowed him to explore Wolverine's history in far greater emotional depth. Liev Schreiber plays Victor Creed, who later becomes known as Sabretooth, delivering a performance that captures both the ferocity and tragic complexity of Logan's brother. Danny Huston portrays William Stryker, the manipulative military colonel whose ambitions drive much of the film's conflict. Lynn Collins plays Kayla Silverfox, Logan's love interest, whose storyline becomes central to the emotional stakes of the film. Ryan Reynolds appears as Wade Wilson, a fast-talking mercenary whose character later transforms into Weapon 11, a role that would eventually inspire Reynolds' future portrayal of Deadpool in his own standalone franchise years later. Other members of the cast include Will.i.am as John Wraith, a teleporting mutant and member of Team X, Kevin Durand as Fred Dukes, also known as the Blob, and Taylor Kitsch playing Gambit, a card-throwing mutant who becomes an ally to Wolverine later in the story. Dominic Monaghan also appears as Chris Bradley, another member of Team X with electromagnetic manipulation abilities. Together, this ensemble cast helped bring to life a wide range of mutants from Marvel Comics lore, blending established characters with new additions specifically created for this origin story. In terms of release information, X-Men Origins. Wolverine was released theatrically on May 1, 2009, in the United States, distributed by 20th Century Fox as part of their continued expansion of the X-Men cinematic universe following the success of the original trilogy. The film arrived with significant anticipation from fans, largely due to Hugh Jackman's continued popularity in the role and the promise of exploring Wolverine's mysterious past in far greater detail than any previous film had offered. Despite generating strong box office numbers upon release, the film received a mixed critical reception, with many reviewers praising Jackman's performance and the action sequences while criticizing the handling of certain characters, particularly the portrayal of Deadpool, which sparked considerable debate among fans of the comics. Nevertheless, the film remains a significant part of X-Men cinematic history, as it deepened the emotional backstory of one of the franchise's most beloved characters and helped pave the way for future spin-off projects within the broader Marvel Mutant universe. Regarding trailer information, the official theatrical trailer for X-Men Origins, Wolverine was released months ahead of the film's premiere, generating massive buzz online due to intense action sequences, glimpses of Wolverine's adamantium claws bursting through his fists, and dramatic flashes of his complicated relationship with Victor Creed. The trailer emphasized the emotional weight of Logan's transformation, teasing his descent into the Weapon X program and hinting at the tragic circumstances that shape his identity. It also showcased explosive action set pieces, including motorcycle chases, helicopter confrontations, and intense hand-to-hand combat, all of which helped build significant excitement among longtime fans of the character prior to release. The trailer's marketing strategy focused heavily on Jackman's physical transformation and commitment to the role, further boosting anticipation for the film's debut. The story of X-Men Origins. Wolverine begins in the icy wilderness of the Canadian Northwest sometime in the 1800s, in a place far removed from the modern world audiences would later come to associate with the character of Wolverine. Here we meet a young boy named James Howlett, a frail and sickly child who spends his days confined largely to his bed due to a series of ongoing illnesses that leave him weak compared to other boys his age. Despite his physical frailty, James possesses a deep sensitivity and an emotional bond with a slightly older boy living on the same estate named Victor Creed, who the audience will soon learn is far more than a simple childhood friend. James lives with his family on a wealthy Canadian estate, cared for by hired groundskeepers, and his household is one of quiet tension beneath the surface of politeness and privilege. As the story unfolds through his youthful eyes, we witness a devastating night that will change his life forever. His father figure, a man named Thomas Logan, is confronted violently by another man on the estate, an act that spirals into tragedy when a horrifying truth is revealed, one that shatters James's understanding of who he truly is. In the chaos and grief of that night, driven by rage, fear, and heartbreak, something awakens inside James that had never surfaced before. Sharp, bone-like claws suddenly emerge from between his knuckles for the first time, and in a moment of instinctual fury and devastation, he uses them in an act of violence against the very man who caused the tragedy, a man whom the audience comes to understand may have actually been his true biological father, revealing the very origin of his adopted last name of Logan. It is a chilling and emotional beginning, establishing that the claws so iconic to Wolverine's identity were born not from careful design but from trauma, grief, and the violent unraveling of a family secret. Following this tragic night, James and Victor flee the estate together, running out into the wilderness as two young boys bound together by blood, tragedy, and survival, though whether they are truly brothers by blood remains something implied and layered rather than explicitly detailed at this early point in the story. From here, the film accelerates through time using a sweeping and stylized montage that captures James, who will eventually be known to the world as Logan, and Victor Creed aging and enduring through more than a full century of history side by side. The audience sees flashes of them as young men fighting through the American Civil War, standing on opposite lines only to find themselves reunited despite the divisions of war around them, their healing abilities allowing them to survive gunfire and violence that would kill ordinary men instantly. The montage continues forward into the trenches of World War I, showing the two of them enduring the brutal and muddy chaos of a war unlike anything humanity had faced before, their mutant abilities keeping them alive through artillery fire and hand-to-hand combat that leaves countless soldiers around them dead. Time continues to march forward, and we see them again in World War II, now hardened, quiet, and increasingly weary from decades of endless combat, their expressions betraying the toll that immortality through healing takes on a soul that still ages emotionally even if the body does not. Throughout this entire journey through history, the bond between Logan and Victor deepens, forged through shared survival, protecting each other on the battlefield again and again, yet subtle cracks begin to show, particularly in Victor's demeanor, as his enjoyment of violence grows more pronounced and more disturbing with each passing war, hinting at the darker path his character is destined to walk. Eventually, the sweeping historical montage brings them into the era of the Vietnam War, where the tone of the story shifts and darkens considerably. During a tense mission in the jungles of Vietnam, the two brothers find themselves being accused of a crime against a superior officer, and it is here that Victor's increasingly unstable and violent nature crosses a line that finally catches up with them both. Following the incident, Logan and Victor are arrested by military authorities and sentenced to execution by firing squad, a punishment meant to be final and irreversible. However, due to their extraordinary mutant healing factors, both men survive the execution completely unscathed, their bodies knitting back together from what should have been fatal wounds within moments. This astonishing display of resilience does not go unnoticed. Watching quietly from the shadows is a man named William Stryker, a calculating and ambitious military colonel who recognizes an incredible opportunity in what he has just witnessed. Approaching the two men following their survival, Stryker offers them an alternative to imprisonment or further punishment, inviting them to join a highly classified and elite military unit composed entirely of mutants, an organization that will later be referred to as Team X. Logan and Victor accept Stryker's offer, and the story transitions into showing their time as members of this secretive Black Ops team, working alongside several other mutants recruited for their unique and dangerous abilities. Among this new group is Wade Wilson, a wisecracking and incredibly skilled swordsman whose fast-talking nature and combat prowess make him a memorable presence within the team. There is also John Wraith, a mutant capable of near-instantaneous teleportation, whose calm and steady demeanor often serves as a grounding presence amid the chaos of missions. Fred Dukes, a large and immensely strong mutant later nicknamed the Blob due to his transformation and lifestyle choices, rounds out the team with his brute strength, while Chris Bradley possesses the ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields and metal objects around him with startling precision. Agent Zero, an exceptionally skilled marksman with unnervingly precise aim, completes this assembly of extraordinary individuals operating under Stryker's direct command. Together, this team carries out a series of covert missions around the world, often venturing into dangerous and morally murky territory in pursuit of objectives that are never fully explained to the team members themselves, following orders handed down by Stryker without question. The turning point for Logan comes during a mission that takes the team into a remote location where they are tasked with retrieving an unspecified valuable resource, a mission that Stryker frames as vital to national security. During the course of this operation, Logan witnesses the team, and particularly Victor, engaging in acts of violence against civilians that go far beyond what Logan considers acceptable or justified, even within the brutal context of covert military operations. Disturbed and disgusted by what he has seen, and increasingly alarmed by Victor's escalating bloodlust which now seems to relish rather than merely tolerate violence, Logan makes the difficult decision to walk away from Team X entirely. He confronts Stryker directly, declaring that he wants no further part in the operations of the unit, and despite the tension this creates, he ultimately leaves the group behind, choosing to abandon the world of covert warfare in search of a quieter, more peaceful existence. This decision marks a significant turning point in the story, establishing Logan as a man who, despite everything he has endured and every act of violence he has been part of, still holds on to some fundamental sense of morality and restraint that separates him fundamentally from his brother Victor, whose descent into darkness continues unchecked in Logan's absence. Following his departure from Team X, Logan settles into a new life far from the chaos of war and covert operations, relocating to the beautiful and remote Canadian Rockies where he takes up work as a logger, living a simple and grounded existence among towering trees and pristine wilderness. It is here that Logan finds unexpected happiness and connection with a local schoolteacher named Kayla Silverfox, whose warmth, intelligence, and genuine affection for Logan slowly draws him out of the emotional isolation that decades of war and violence had built around him. Their relationship blossoms into something Logan had perhaps never truly allowed himself to have before, a sense of peace, belonging, and love that stands in stark contrast to the brutal life he left behind. For a time, it appears that Logan has finally found the quiet life he has been searching for across more than a century of turmoil, working during the day among the loggers and returning each evening to Kayla, allowing himself, for the first time in the story, to imagine a future defined by something other than violence and survival. This fragile peace is shattered when former members of Team X, including Wade Wilson, John Wraith, and Fred Dukes, begin turning up dead under mysterious and violent circumstances, each killing bearing the unmistakable signature of Victor Creed's brutal methods. It becomes clear that Victor has begun systematically hunting down and eliminating his former teammates one by one, seemingly acting under new orders while indulging his own violent impulses along the way. Logan is eventually confronted by this reality directly when Victor arrives at his peaceful home in the Rockies, and in the resulting confrontation, tragedy strikes when Kayla appears to be brutally killed in the chaos of the fight. Devastated and consumed by grief and rage over the loss of the woman he loved, Logan's carefully built peaceful existence collapses entirely, leaving him with nothing but the burning desire for vengeance against the brother who has taken everything from him. In the aftermath of this devastating loss, William Stryker reappears in Logan's life, approaching him with a proposition designed specifically to exploit his grief and thirst for revenge. Stryker reveals that he is running a highly classified experimental program known as Weapon X, a project aimed at creating the ultimate soldier by bonding the virtually indestructible metal known as adamantium directly onto a mutant subject's skeleton. Stryker promises Logan that undergoing this procedure will grant him not only near invulnerability, but also the power necessary to hunt down, and finally kill Victor Creed, the man responsible for destroying everything Logan had built for himself. Blinded by grief and driven by an overwhelming need for vengeance, Logan agrees to undergo the procedure, despite the obvious danger and uncertainty surrounding what Stryker's experiment might actually involve. The sequence depicting the Weapon X procedure itself stands as one of the most visually intense and emotionally significant moments, showing Logan strapped down within a specialized facility as scientists and technicians work to infuse the molten adamantium directly into his skeletal structure, a process depicted as excruciatingly painful, with Logan's healing factor being both the reason he can survive such an invasive procedure and the reason he must endure the pain fully conscious throughout, as it prevents him from being sedated in any conventional sense. Amid the smoke, machinery, and clinical brutality of the laboratory, Logan's body is transformed, his bones reinforced with the unbreakable metal that will come to define his physical resilience for the rest of his existence. However, before the procedure can be fully completed and before Stryker can carry out his true plans, which involve wiping Logan's memory entirely to turn him into a fully compliant weapon with no will of his own, Logan becomes aware of the deeper and more sinister nature of what is truly happening within the facility. Realizing that he has been manipulated and that Stryker's ultimate intention is to erase his mind and turn him into an obedient instrument of war, Logan violently breaks free from the restraints holding him down, and in a now iconic sequence, his newly formed adamantium claws burst forth from his hands for the first time, gleaming and lethal, replacing the bone claws he had possessed since childhood. In a desperate and explosive escape, Logan fights his way out of the facility, leaving destruction in his wake as he flees into the wilderness, now physically transformed but emotionally raw and confused about the depths of the betrayal he has just experienced. This escape marks the true birth of the character the world will come to know as Wolverine, no longer simply James Howlett or Logan the Logger, but a man forever changed by adamantium, grief, and betrayal. As Logan attempts to piece together what has happened to him and process the magnitude of Stryker's deception, the story reveals a devastating twist regarding Kayla Silverfox, showing that she did not actually die during the earlier confrontation with Victor, as Logan had believed. In truth, Kayla is revealed to be alive, and shockingly it becomes clear that her death was staged as part of an elaborate manipulation orchestrated by Stryker specifically to push Logan toward agreeing to undergo the Weapon X procedure, using Logan's love for her and his subsequent grief as a tool to control and manipulate him into becoming the weapon Stryker desired. This revelation adds profound layers of betrayal to Logan's journey, showing that even the person he trusted and loved most had been entangled, whether willingly or unwillingly, in Stryker's calculated scheme to create his ultimate soldier. Continuing his search for answers and driven now by both anger towards Stryker and confusion regarding Kayla's true fate, Logan's path crosses with a young mutant named Scott Summers, a teenager who possesses the ability to fire powerful optic blasts from his eyes, a character audiences would recognize as the future X-Men leader known as Cyclops. Their paths intersect amid the broader unfolding conspiracy, as Logan begins piecing together that Stryker's ambitions extend far beyond simply creating one enhanced soldier, uncovering evidence that Stryker has been abducting and experimenting on various mutants in pursuit of an even more terrifying goal, one involving the creation of an ultimate weapon unlike anything seen before. Logan's investigation eventually leads him to seek assistance from other individuals capable of helping him navigate this dangerous and shadowy conspiracy, bringing him into contact with a charming and skilled mutant named Remy LeBeau, known more commonly as Gambit, a card-throwing, kinetic energy manipulating mutant with a rebellious streak and a personal history connected to Stryker's secretive facility located on a remote island. Gambit, initially wary and reluctant to become involved, eventually agrees to help Logan gain access to the heavily guarded island facility where Stryker has been conducting his most dangerous experiments, understanding that the stakes involved extend far beyond Logan's personal quest for revenge and touch upon the safety of mutants everywhere who might fall victim to Stryker's ruthless ambitions. As Logan, aided by Gambit, makes his way toward the island facility, the true horror of Stryker's ultimate project is gradually revealed. Deep within this secretive complex, Stryker has been working on what he calls Weapon 11, an experiment far more ambitious and monstrous than the adamantium skeleton procedure performed on Logan. Weapon 11 is revealed to be constructed using the body of Wade Wilson, the same skilled swordsman and former Team X member Logan once fought alongside, though Wade's original personality and characteristics have been horrifically altered and suppressed through the experimental process. Stryker has fused numerous mutant abilities into this singular creation, stripping the character of his original voice and personality while granting him a horrifying combination of powers drawn from multiple mutants, including devastating optic blasts reminiscent of Cyclops, rapid teleportation abilities similar to those once possessed by John Wraith, and an accelerated healing factor rivaling Logan's own, creating an almost unstoppable hybrid weapon designed purely for combat and destruction. With his mouth sealed shut to prevent him from talking back or using any vocal-based abilities against his creators. The confrontation building toward the climax of the film brings together all of the story's major threads, as Logan discovers that Kayla Silverfox has actually been working undercover, having been coerced by Stryker into monitoring Logan on his behalf under threat to her own safety. Though her feelings for Logan throughout their time together in the Rockies were shown to be genuine despite the manipulation surrounding their circumstances. As the situation on the island escalates, Victor Creed also reappears, his loyalty to Stryker beginning to waver once he realizes the full extent of what Stryker has done and intends to do, including his plans regarding Logan and the broader implications of unleashing an uncontrollable weapon like Weapon 11 upon the world. The climax of the film takes place at a nuclear power facility situated on the island, where chaos erupts as Weapon 11 is unleashed, proving to be an almost unstoppable force of destruction, effortlessly overpowering those who attempt to stand against him due to his combination of devastating abilities. In this desperate and explosive final confrontation, Logan and Victor, despite everything that has transpired between them and the deep betrayal and violence that has defined their relationship for years, find themselves forced to set aside their personal conflict temporarily in order to survive against the far greater threat posed by Weapon 11. This uneasy alliance between the two brothers showcases a brief but powerful return to the loyalty and camaraderie that once defined their relationship across more than a century of shared history, even as both men know that their personal reckoning still awaits once this immediate threat has been dealt with. The battle against Weapon 11 proves to be brutal and relentless, testing the limits of Logan's newfound adamantium-enhanced abilities as he fights alongside Victor amid the crumbling and dangerous environment of the nuclear facility, with explosions, collapsing structures, and the ever-present threat of Weapon She's overwhelming combination of powers creating a genuinely tense and high-stakes final confrontation. Throughout this climactic battle, Kayla Silverfox plays a crucial role, ultimately choosing to protect Logan when Stryker, having survived amid the chaos, attempts to eliminate Logan once and for all now that his carefully laid plans have fallen apart. In a moment of profound sacrifice, Kayla places herself between Logan and danger, ultimately giving her life to protect the man she has come to genuinely love despite the manipulation and deception that originally brought them together under Stryker's orders. Following the defeat of Weapon 11 and amid the devastating loss of Kayla, The story reaches its emotional and narrative climax as Logan, consumed by grief and rage over losing Kayla for what now appears to be the final and true time, confronts William Stryker directly. Cornered and desperate, Stryker, understanding that conventional weapons cannot harm a being with Logan's adamantium-laced healing abilities, resorts to using a specially crafted bullet made of adamantium itself, the only substance capable of causing Logan lasting harm. In a devastating final act, Stryker shoots Logan directly in the head with this adamantium bullet, an act specifically intended to erase Logan's memories entirely rather than kill him outright, since Logan's healing factor prevents the wound itself from being fatal. But the adamantium bullet lodging within his brain proves sufficient to wipe away his memories of everything that has happened, including his relationship with Kayla, his time with Victor, and the entire ordeal surrounding Stryker's experiments. The film concludes with Logan surviving this final act of betrayal, his body healing from the physical wound even as his mind remains stripped of the memories that once defined his identity, and his understanding of who he truly is. This heartbreaking yet narratively significant ending serves as a direct bridge connecting this origin story to the original X-Men film, in which audiences first encountered Logan as a mysterious loner with no memory of his past, wandering without direction or purpose until his eventual recruitment by Professor Charles Xavier and the X-Men. The final moments of the film show a now amnesiac Logan walking away from the wreckage of the island facility, his physical scars healed by his mutant abilities but his emotional and psychological wounds left permanently unresolved, setting the stage for the character's continued journey throughout the broader X-Men film series, in which his search for identity, memory, and understanding of his own mysterious past becomes an ongoing and central theme across future installments. Throughout this deeply personal and emotionally driven origin story, X-Men Origins, Wolverine works to humanize a character who, despite his fearsome claws and seemingly indestructible healing abilities, remains at his core someone shaped profoundly by loss, betrayal, and the search for meaning and connection across more than a century of turbulent history. From the tragic circumstances of his childhood that first triggered his mutant abilities, through the brotherhood and eventual rivalry that defined his relationship with Victor Creed, to the manipulation he suffered at the hands of William Stryker, and the profound loss of Kayla Silverfox. Logan's journey throughout this film establishes the emotional foundation for the character audiences would continue to follow throughout the remainder of the X-Men franchise, a man burdened by immortality and physical invulnerability yet perpetually vulnerable to the emotional wounds inflicted by those closest to him. Here is the complete life history of the main cast of X-Men Origins, Wolverine, written in lengthy, flowing paragraphs exactly as you like your content structured, covering each actor's background, rise to fame, career journey, and personal story, with no outside references included and no unnecessary headings breaking up the flow. Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman, the man who brought Wolverine to life across nearly 2 decades of the X-Men franchise, was born in Sydney, Australia, into a family with British roots, as his parents had emigrated from England before he was born. Growing up in Australia, Jackman experienced a childhood that was marked by both privilege in terms of opportunity and personal hardship, as his parents separated when he was still a young boy, with his mother returning to England while his father remained in Australia to raise Hugh and his siblings largely on his own. This early experience of family separation shaped Jackman's character significantly, instilling in him a strong sense of resilience and independence from a young age, qualities that would later serve him while navigating the unpredictable and demanding world of professional acting. Jackman attended a boys' grammar school in Sydney where he was known more for his athletic pursuits and outgoing personality than for any early indication that he would become one of the most recognized action stars in the world. During his university years, Jackman studied communications and journalism, initially planning for a career entirely outside the entertainment industry, believing that acting was not a realistic or practical path for someone with his background. However, during his time at university, Jackman discovered a passion for drama and performance almost by accident, taking a drama course that ultimately changed the trajectory of his entire life, leading him to pursue further training at a prestigious drama school in Australia where he honed his craft in theater, learning the fundamentals of stage performance that would later inform his approach to film acting as well. Jackman's early career was built primarily on the Australian stage and television, where he took on a variety of roles in musical theatre productions, a background that proved unusual for an actor who would later become synonymous with a gruff, physically intense superhero character. But this musical theatre foundation gave Jackman a level of versatility and discipline that few of his action star contemporaries possessed. His breakout moment on the world stage came when he was cast as Wolverine in the original X-Men film, a role that was initially intended for another actor before circumstances led to Jackman stepping in. And despite being relatively unknown to international audiences at the time, Jackman's intense physicality, gravelly voice, and commitment to embodying the gruff yet emotionally layered character of Logan immediately resonated with both critics and audiences. This role transformed Jackman almost overnight from a respected but largely unknown Australian performer into a global superstar, and over the following years he would go on to reprise the role of Wolverine numerous times across multiple X-Men films, each time deepening his physical transformation for the part through rigorous training regimens that became almost as famous as his performances themselves. Beyond his work in the X-Men franchise, Jackman has built an extraordinarily diverse career that showcases his range far beyond the action genre, taking on significant roles in major musical productions including a highly praised performance as the character of Jean Valjean in a big-screen adaptation of a beloved stage musical. A role that demonstrated his roots in musical theater and earned him significant critical acclaim and award recognition. He has also hosted major award ceremonies, showcasing his charisma and comfort in front of live audiences, further establishing him as one of the most versatile entertainers of his generation. Throughout his career, Jackman has remained closely associated with charitable work and humanitarian causes, using his platform to support various causes close to his heart. On a personal level, Jackman was married for many years to fellow actress Deborah Lee Furness, whom he met on the set of an Australian television production early in his career, and the couple adopted 2 children together, building a family life that Jackman has often spoken about as being central to his sense of identity beyond his professional achievements. His dedication to the role of Wolverine specifically became legendary within the industry, as he maintained an incredibly demanding physical training and dietary regimen for years in order to portray the character's muscular and intimidating physique authentically, a commitment that spanned nearly 2 decades and multiple films, making him one of the longest continuously serving actors in a single superhero role in the history of cinema. Liev Schreiber. Liev Schreiber, who portrayed the ferocious and complex Victor Creed in X-Men Origins, Wolverine, was born in San Francisco, California, and experienced an unconventional and artistically rich upbringing that would later inform the depth and nuance he brought to his acting career. His childhood was shaped significantly by his mother, an artist and free-spirited individual who exposed young Liev to a bohemian lifestyle filled with creative influences from an early age, while his relationship with his father was more distant during much of his youth, adding a layer of complexity to his early family life that some have suggested influenced the emotional depth he often brings to portraying complicated familial relationships on screen, something quite relevant to his portrayal of the fraught brotherhood between Victor Creed and Logan in this film. Schreiber pursued his education with a strong academic focus, eventually attending Yale University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the United States, where he studied and developed his craft before further honing his acting skills at a renowned drama program in London, giving him a classical and highly disciplined foundation in performance that set him apart from many of his contemporaries in Hollywood. This rigorous theatrical training became evident throughout his career, as Schreiber built much of his early reputation not in film but on the stage, becoming particularly well regarded for his work in classical theater productions. including numerous acclaimed performances in Shakespearean roles that earned him significant recognition within the theater community long before mainstream film audiences became familiar with his name. His deep respect for and connection to stage work has remained a consistent thread throughout his career, with Schreiber frequently returning to Broadway and other prestigious theatrical stages even after achieving considerable success in film and television, a rare commitment among actors who often transition away from theater once film stardom is achieved. In terms of his film career, Schreiber gradually built a reputation as a dependable and versatile character actor, taking on a wide range of roles across various genres including psychological thrillers, dramas, and horror films, often being praised for bringing intelligence and unexpected depth to roles that could have easily become one-dimensional in less capable hands. His portrayal of Victor Creed in X-Men Origins, Wolverine allowed him to explore a physically intimidating and menacing character while still injecting the role with a sense of tragic complexity, portraying Victor not simply as a villain but as a deeply damaged individual whose violent tendencies stem from decades of trauma and a complicated relationship with his brother. This nuanced approach to villainy has become something of a hallmark of Schreiber's career, as he has often gravitated toward morally ambiguous characters that require a delicate balance between menace and humanity. Beyond his film work, Schreiber found significant television success starring in a critically acclaimed drama series where he portrayed a fixer working within the world of professional sports, a role that earned him considerable praise and further cemented his reputation as one of the most respected and reliable performers of his generation. On a personal level, Schreiber was in a long-term relationship with actress Naomi Watts for many years, with the couple raising 2 sons together before eventually separating, and throughout the years Schreiber has remained a relatively private individual, preferring to let his extensive body of work speak for itself rather than courting excessive public attention. A trait that aligns with his theatrical background and his reputation within the industry as a serious and dedicated craftsman, rather than a celebrity in the more conventional Hollywood sense. Danny Huston. Danny Huston, who portrayed the calculating and morally compromised William Stryker in the film, comes from one of the most storied and influential families in the history of American cinema, being the son of legendary director John Huston, a filmmaker responsible for numerous classic films that helped define entire eras of Hollywood cinema, and the grandson of actor Walter Huston, meaning that Danny was essentially born into filmmaking royalty, with a family legacy stretching back multiple generations within the entertainment industry. Growing up surrounded by this rich cinematic heritage undoubtedly shaped Danny's early exposure to the craft of storytelling, though rather than immediately following in his father's footsteps as a director or pursuing acting right away, Huston initially charted his own path within the industry by pursuing directing work himself during the earlier portions of his career, working on various film and documentary projects that allowed him to develop his own creative voice separate from the immense shadow cast by his father's legendary reputation. It was only somewhat later in his professional journey that Huston transitioned more fully into acting, a shift that ultimately proved to be where he would find his most significant and lasting success, gradually building a reputation throughout the industry as a supremely skilled character actor capable of bringing gravitas, intelligence, and often unsettling charisma to complex and morally ambiguous roles across a wide variety of film genres. Huston's distinctive voice and commanding screen presence made him particularly well suited to portraying authority figures whose moral compass is questionable, a niche he has occupied frequently throughout his career, playing everything from historical figures to fictional villains across numerous acclaimed films. His portrayal of William Stryker in X-Men Origins, Wolverine exemplifies this particular strength, as Huston brings a chilling sense of calm rationality to a character whose actions throughout the film are anything but rational or humane, creating a villain whose menace comes not from overt aggression but from a quiet and calculated willingness to manipulate and sacrifice those around him in pursuit of his broader ambitions. Beyond his work in the X-Men franchise, Huston has appeared in numerous other significant film projects spanning historical dramas, psychological thrillers, and prestige pictures, frequently working with acclaimed directors who recognized his ability to elevate supporting and antagonist roles through sheer command of presence and vocal delivery. Despite being born into a family with an almost unparalleled legacy within Hollywood, Huston has managed to carve out his own distinct professional identity through decades of consistent and well-regarded work, avoiding the trap that sometimes befalls children of legendary filmmakers who struggle to escape comparisons to their famous relatives. His approach to acting reflects a deep understanding of storytelling craft, likely absorbed through his unique upbringing surrounded by filmmaking legends, combined with his own personal dedication to developing a distinctive and recognizable style entirely separate from his family's directorial legacy. Huston has continued to work steadily across film and television throughout the years following his appearance in X-Men Origins, Wolverine, maintaining his reputation as one of the more reliably compelling character actors working within contemporary Hollywood, someone whose presence in any project often signals a certain level of dramatic seriousness and quality. Lynn Collins, who brought the emotionally significant role of Kayla Silverfox to life in X-Men Origins, Wolverine, was born in Houston, Texas, and grew up with an early passion for the performing arts that would eventually lead her toward a dedicated pursuit of acting as a professional career. From a young age, Collins demonstrated a strong interest in theater and storytelling, eventually pursuing formal training in the craft of acting at a prestigious drama conservatory, where she developed a strong foundation in classical performance techniques that would later distinguish her work across film, television, and stage productions throughout her career. Much like several of her castmates in X-Men Origins, Wolverine, Collins built an early reputation through significant work in theater, becoming particularly well known within theatrical circles for her performances in various Shakespearean productions, showcasing a range and depth that many felt was somewhat underutilized once she transitioned more fully into film work, where she often found herself cast in roles that, while showcasing her talent, did not always allow for the same depth of expression she had demonstrated on stage. Her breakthrough into wider recognition came through a series of film roles that gradually built her profile within Hollywood, eventually leading to her casting as Kayla Silverfox in X-Men Origins, Wolverine, a role that required her to convey significant emotional complexity, portraying a character whose true loyalties and motivations remain uncertain for much of the film, ultimately revealing herself to be caught between genuine affection for Logan and the manipulative circumstances imposed upon her by William Stryker. Collins brought a quiet strength and emotional authenticity to the role, helping ground the film's more fantastical and action-oriented elements with a genuine human connection that gave weight to Logan's motivations throughout the story. Following her role in this film, Collins continued to work across various film projects, including a notable role in a large-scale science fiction adventure film based on classic literary source material, where she once again demonstrated her ability to hold her own within effects-heavy blockbuster productions while still bringing genuine emotional depth to her characters. Throughout her career, Collins has continued to balance her film work with her ongoing dedication to theater, frequently returning to the stage between film projects, reflecting her deep-rooted passion for live performance that first drew her to acting in the first place. Beyond her acting career, Collins has also explored other creative avenues, demonstrating a broader artistic sensibility that extends beyond pure performance into other forms of creative expression. Her work in X-Men Origins, Wolverine remains one of the more emotionally significant contributions to the film, as her character's fate directly drives much of Logan's transformation and motivation throughout the story, making her performance a crucial emotional anchor within a film otherwise dominated by large-scale action and complex mythology surrounding the broader X-Men universe. Ryan Reynolds, whose portrayal of Wade Wilson in X-Men Origins, Wolverine would eventually pave the way for one of the most successful and beloved character franchises in modern superhero cinema, was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, growing up in a working-class family environment that instilled in him a strong sense of humor and resilience from an early age. qualities that would become defining characteristics of both his on-screen persona and his real-life public image throughout his career. Reynolds began his acting career quite young, initially finding work in Canadian television productions before gradually building experience that would eventually lead him toward opportunities in the United States film and television industry. His early breakthrough came through his role in a popular television sitcom set in a college fraternity environment, where his natural comedic timing and charismatic screen presence first caught the attention of wider audiences, establishing him early on as a performer with a gift for quick-witted, fast-talking comedic delivery, a skill set that would later become absolutely central to his most iconic role. Following his television success, Reynolds transitioned into film work, taking on a variety of roles across comedy and action genres throughout the early portion of his film career, gradually building his reputation as a versatile leading man capable of handling both dramatic material and comedic material with equal skill. His casting as Wade Wilson in X-Men Origins, Wolverine represented an important, if ultimately controversial, moment in his career, as the film's portrayal of the character diverged significantly from the fast-talking, fourth-wall-breaking mercenary that comic book fans had come to know and love, particularly in how the character was transformed into the nearly silent Weapon 11 by the film's climax. A decision that generated significant backlash from devoted fans of the source material who felt the character's most defining traits had been stripped away entirely. Despite this controversy, Reynolds himself had grown genuinely passionate about the character during his time working on the film, and he became a vocal advocate over the following years for a proper, faithful adaptation of the character that would honor the source material's irreverent humor and unique narrative style. This passion project would eventually come to fruition years later when Reynolds starred in and produced a stand-alone film dedicated entirely to the character, one that embraced the irreverent, fourth-wall-breaking humor and ultra-violent action that fans had always associated with the character, and this film would go on to become an enormous critical and commercial success, fundamentally transforming Reynolds' career and cementing him as one of the most recognizable and beloved actors working in the superhero genre. The success of this franchise allowed Reynolds to demonstrate his full comedic and dramatic range, blending sharp improvisational humor with genuine emotional depth, and it ultimately became one of the most financially successful R-rated franchises in cinema history. Beyond his work in the superhero genre, Reynolds has built a diverse career encompassing romantic comedies, dramas, and voice acting work, while also developing a reputation as a savvy businessman, becoming involved in various entrepreneurial ventures outside of acting, including investments in beverage companies and telecommunications businesses, demonstrating a business acumen that few of his acting contemporaries have matched. On a personal level, Reynolds is married to actress Blake Lively, with the couple raising several children together, and Reynolds has become well known publicly for his humorous and self-deprecating social media presence, which has further endeared him to fans worldwide and became an important part of his broader public persona and marketing strategy surrounding his most famous role. Will Adams, known professionally by his stage name Will.i.am, brought the teleporting mutant John Wraith to life in X-Men Origins, Wolverine, representing something of a departure from his primary career, as he is far better known globally as a musician, record producer, and founding member of a highly successful hip-hop group that achieved massive commercial success throughout the early 2000s and beyond. Born and raised in Los Angeles, California, Will.i.am grew up in a challenging economic environment, being raised primarily by his mother in a housing project, an upbringing that instilled in him a strong sense of determination and ambition that would later drive his remarkable rise within both the music and broader entertainment industries. From a young age, Will.i.am demonstrated a passion for music and performance, eventually helping to form a musical group alongside several friends during his teenage years, a group that would gradually evolve and grow over time before eventually achieving mainstream breakthrough success as one of the defining pop and hip-hop acts of their era. known for blending diverse musical influences and embracing innovative approaches to music production and songwriting. As the group's success grew exponentially throughout the years, will.i.am became known not only as a performer but also as a highly skilled producer, working behind the scenes on music for numerous other prominent artists across the industry, showcasing a broader creative and technical skill set beyond simply performing on stage. His interest in technology and innovation has also become a significant part of his public identity over the years, as will.i.am has been involved in various technology-focused ventures and has spoken frequently about his interest in artificial intelligence, robotics, and other emerging technologies, positioning himself as something of a bridge between the entertainment industry and the technology sector. His casting in X-Men Origins, Wolverine as John Wraith represented one of his more notable forays into film acting, a medium in which he has appeared periodically throughout his career, though his primary professional identity has remained rooted firmly in music and production work rather than acting. Within the context of this film, will.i.am's portrayal of John Wraith contributed to the ensemble dynamic of the Team X sequences, playing a mutant whose calm and steady demeanor provided a grounding presence amid the team's more volatile personalities. Beyond his entertainment career, will.i.am has also become known for his philanthropic efforts, particularly focused on education and technology access for underserved communities, reflecting his own personal journey from a challenging upbringing to international stardom and using his platform and resources to create opportunities for others facing similar circumstances. His career trajectory, spanning music, production, technology, philanthropy, and occasional film work, illustrates a remarkably diverse and multifaceted professional path that extends well beyond the relatively brief but memorable appearance he made within the X-Men film franchise. Kevin Durand. Kevin Durand, who portrayed the physically imposing Fred Dukes, also known as the Blob, was born in Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada, and pursued a path toward acting that involved building a steady and diverse body of work across film and television throughout the years leading up to his role in X-Men Origins, Wolverine. Durand developed a reputation within the industry as a highly capable character actor, often being cast in roles that made effective use of his imposing physical stature and distinctive screen presence, frequently playing intimidating or antagonistic characters across a wide range of genres including science fiction, fantasy, and action films. Before his role in X-Men Origins, Wolverine, Durand had already begun building recognition through his work in a popular television drama series that followed the survivors of a plane crash stranded on a mysterious island, a show that became a significant cultural phenomenon during its original run and helped introduce Durand to a broader television viewing audience. His portrayal of Fred Dukes required significant physical transformation, as the character's storyline involves his body changing dramatically over time due to the effects of his mutant abilities combined with a lifestyle of indulgence, and Durand approached the physical demands of the role with the same dedication that has characterized much of his career, often taking on roles that require substantial physical commitment and transformation. Following his appearance in this film, Durand continued to build a steady and prolific career, appearing in numerous major film franchises across various genres, frequently being cast in fantasy and science fiction projects where his imposing presence and versatility as a character actor could be effectively utilized. He has become particularly well regarded within the industry for his ability to bring unexpected nuance and even occasional dark humor to characters who might otherwise be portrayed as simple, one-dimensional villains or henchmen, elevating supporting roles through committed and thoughtful performances. Throughout his career, Durand has maintained a reputation as a dependable and hardworking character actor, someone whose presence in a film often signals a certain level of genre credibility, particularly within the action, fantasy, and science fiction spaces where he has found consistent and steady work over the course of many years. His contribution to X-Men Origins, Wolverine as Fred Dukes, while not among the film's most prominent roles, remains a memorable part of the ensemble cast that helped bring the world of Team X to life on screen, showcasing the range of unique and visually distinctive mutants that populated Stryker's covert operations throughout the earlier portions of the film's timeline. Taylor Kitsch. Taylor Kitsch, who portrayed the charming and rebellious Gambit, was born in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada, and experienced a challenging and somewhat unconventional path toward his eventual acting career, having initially pursued opportunities in professional hockey during his younger years before a serious injury forced him to reconsider his career trajectory entirely, ultimately leading him toward modeling and eventually acting as alternative creative and professional outlets. This early setback and subsequent pivot toward performance arts became a defining aspect of Kitsch's personal narrative, often cited as an example of resilience and adaptability in the face of significant early disappointment. Kitsch relocated to the United States to pursue acting opportunities more seriously, eventually finding his breakthrough role in a critically acclaimed television drama series centered around high school football in a small Texas town, a show that, despite not achieving massive mainstream ratings success during its original broadcast run, developed an intensely devoted critical and fan following and is often cited among the most acclaimed television dramas of its era, with Kitsch's performance as a troubled and complex young athlete earning him significant praise and establishing him as an actor to watch within the industry. Building on this critical success, Kitsch was cast as Remy LeBeau, known as Gambit, in X-Men Origins, Wolverine, bringing a charismatic and roguish energy to the character that captured the comic book version's characteristic charm and rebellious nature, despite the character's relatively limited screen time within the overall film. Following this role, Kitsch found himself cast in several major blockbuster film productions over subsequent years, taking on lead roles in large-scale science fiction and action films that represented significant studio investments and high-profile opportunities, though several of these projects underperformed commercially despite Kitsch's committed performances, leading to a somewhat turbulent period in his career trajectory following his initial breakthrough. Despite these commercial setbacks, Kitsch continued to demonstrate his range and dedication to his craft, gradually rebuilding his career through a combination of television and film work that showcased his versatility beyond the blockbuster action roles that had defined the middle portion of his career. He has continued to take on projects that allow him to explore more dramatic and nuanced material, reflecting a career approach that prioritizes artistic satisfaction alongside commercial considerations. Kitsch's journey from aspiring professional athlete to respected actor reflects a broader narrative of resilience that has often been highlighted throughout discussions of his career, demonstrating how setbacks in one pursuit can sometimes lead toward unexpected success in an entirely different creative field. Dominic Monaghan. Dominic Monaghan, who portrayed Chris Bradley within the Team X ensemble of X-Men Origins, Wolverine, was born in Berlin, Germany, though he was raised primarily in Manchester, England, growing up in a working-class environment that shaped his down-to-earth and approachable public persona throughout his subsequent acting career. Monaghan's path toward acting began relatively early, taking on various roles in British television productions during his youth before eventually achieving significant international recognition through his casting in a massive fantasy film trilogy based on beloved literary source material, a project that became one of the most critically acclaimed and commercially successful film franchises in cinema history. And Monaghan's portrayal of one of the trilogy's central Hobbit characters introduced him to audiences around the world and established him as a recognizable face within the fantasy and adventure film genres. Following the massive success of this trilogy, Monaghan continued to build his career through additional prominent television and film work, including a significant role in the same popular television drama series about plane crash survivors on a mysterious island that had also featured his eventual X-Men Origins, Wolverine castmate Kevin Durand, further cementing his presence within popular and critically discussed television programming during that era. His casting as Chris Bradley in X-Men Origins, Wolverine allowed him to bring his established screen presence to the superhero genre, playing a mutant with electromagnetic manipulation abilities within the Team X ensemble, contributing to the film's exploration of the diverse and specialized abilities possessed by the various mutants recruited into Stryker's covert operations. Beyond his acting work, Monahan has developed a notable and genuine passion for wildlife and nature, going on to host and produce television programming focused specifically on animals and natural environments, showcasing a side of his interests and personality quite distinct from his fictional on-screen roles. And this passion for wildlife conservation and education has become an increasingly significant part of his public identity over the years, sometimes overshadowing his acting work in terms of his personal engagement and enthusiasm. Monahan has continued to work across film and television throughout his career, balancing his acting pursuits with his genuine personal interests in nature documentary work, reflecting a multifaceted professional identity that extends well beyond his most famous fictional roles. His contribution to X-Men Origins, Wolverine, while representing a smaller supporting role within the broader ensemble cast, remains a notable entry within his diverse filmography, connecting him once again to the world of genre filmmaking that had already brought him significant international recognition through his earlier work in epic fantasy cinema. Here is the complete breakdown of the budget, making, and behind-the-scenes funny moments from X-Men Origins, Wolverine, written in lengthy flowing paragraphs exactly the way your content is structured, with no outside links or resources included and only the details themselves. X-Men Origins, Wolverine was produced on a substantial blockbuster budget of approximately $150 million, a figure that placed it firmly within the upper tier of major studio productions during its era, reflecting 20th Century Fox's confidence in the character of Wolverine as a standalone box office draw following the success of the original X-Men trilogy. This budget had to cover an enormous range of production demands, including large-scale practical stunts, extensive visual effects work, international location shooting across multiple countries, historical war recreation sequences spanning several different eras, and the salaries of a cast led by an already well-established Hollywood star in Hugh Jackman. When the film was finally released, it went on to earn back its investment fairly comfortably at the global box office, pulling in just under $380 million worldwide against its production costs, opening at the top of the North American box office charts during its debut weekend and posting one of the strongest openings of that particular summer season. Despite this financial success, the film has often been remembered as something of a cautionary tale within the industry regarding troubled productions, since the journey to get the movie made proved to be far messier and more chaotic behind the scenes than its polished final theatrical cut might suggest to casual viewers. The making of X-Men Origins, Wolverine began with a screenplay that had been in development for a considerable length of time before cameras ever started rolling. The writer originally brought on to pen the script had pursued the opportunity to write Wolverine's origin story for nearly 3 years before finally being hired to take on the project. Spending considerable time researching classic comic book storylines about the character's mysterious past in order to build a script that felt authentic to longtime fans while still being accessible to mainstream audiences unfamiliar with decades of comic book lore. Hugh Jackman himself became deeply involved in shaping the direction of the story during this development period, pushing for the film to function more as an intimate character study exploring Logan's psychology and emotional wounds rather than simply serving as another large-scale ensemble superhero adventure in the mold of the earlier X-Men films. A second writer was later brought on board to revise and rework significant portions of the screenplay, adding further layers of action and adjusting story elements to fit the demands of a big-budget summer blockbuster. Even with 2 writers contributing to the project, the script continued to be adjusted and rewritten well into the production process itself, creating a genuinely difficult working environment for the director and cast, who often found themselves filming scenes from a screenplay that was still being finalized even as cameras were rolling on set. Compounding these already significant challenges, the production of the film coincided directly with a major Hollywood labor strike involving the union representing film and television writers, a strike that brought an enormous amount of uncertainty and disruption to productions across the entire industry during that period. This meant that X-Men Origins, Wolverine was essentially shot without the ability to bring in additional writers for last-minute script polishes or on-set adjustments once filming was already underway, forcing the director, producers, and even the actors themselves to work creatively within the constraints of whatever script pages already existed, making real-time adjustments to dialogue and scene structure without the usual safety net of a writer readily available to smooth out rough patches. This circumstance has since been reflected upon by members of the cast as one of the most genuinely difficult conditions under which they had ever worked, essentially trying to construct a coherent and emotionally resonant blockbuster narrative while simultaneously missing one of the most crucial resources typically available during a major studio production. The physical production of the film took cast and crew across an impressively wide range of international locations, reflecting the scale and ambition of the project. Principal photography officially began in New Zealand, with the picturesque city of Dunedin serving as one of the key filming locations used to represent various settings throughout the film's storyline. The production also made extensive use of studio facilities in Sydney, Australia, where a significant portion of the film's more controlled interior sequences and effects-heavy scenes were shot. Beyond Australia and New Zealand, the production later relocated to Canada, filming additional sequences in Vancouver, British Columbia, utilizing locations including a local secondary school and facilities connected to a major Canadian university to stand in for various settings within the story. The American state of Louisiana also served as a filming location for certain portions of the production, adding yet another region to the film's genuinely global production footprint. This kind of multi-continent shooting schedule created enormous logistical challenges for the production team, requiring careful coordination of cast schedules, equipment transportation, and local crew hiring across vastly different time zones and regulatory environments, all of which contributed significantly to the overall complexity and cost of bringing the film to the screen. One particularly memorable and dramatic behind-the-scenes controversy arose during the New Zealand portion of filming, centered around the storage of explosive materials needed for one of the film's larger action sequences depicting the destruction of a farmhouse property connected to Logan's backstory. The production had arranged to store a significant quantity of explosives within a local ice skating rink facility in the Queenstown Lakes district, a decision that ended up sparking a formal dispute between local council authorities and the National Labor Department over whether this storage arrangement had been properly authorized and whether it posed any safety concerns for the surrounding community. This disagreement escalated into a fairly public local controversy, ultimately forcing the production to relocate a portion of the stored explosive materials to an alternative site in order to satisfy the concerns being raised by local officials. The farmhouse explosion sequence itself, once finally filmed, turned out to be a hugely complex undertaking, requiring more than a dozen cameras operating simultaneously in order to capture the single explosive event from every conceivable angle, since there would be no opportunity to recreate such a large-scale practical explosion a second time if something went wrong during the initial take. Beyond the explosives controversy itself, Hugh Jackman and his own production company also worked directly with local council representatives to bring in environmental and recycling specialists onto the set, ensuring that the production's environmental impact on the local New Zealand landscape was handled responsibly, reflecting a level of environmental consciousness that was becoming increasingly common among major film productions during that period. Beyond the logistical and environmental challenges surrounding filming locations, the production also experienced very real creative tension between the studio and the film's director throughout the shoot, particularly surrounding certain thematic elements the director wished to include within the story. One especially significant point of disagreement involved the director's desire to portray Logan as a war veteran struggling with what would essentially be depicted as post-traumatic stress, a heavier and more psychologically grounded thematic element that some studio executives reportedly felt was too dark or serious for what was intended to be a crowd-pleasing summer blockbuster aimed at a broad mainstream audience. This creative disagreement grew serious enough that, according to accounts from those involved in the production, the studio had at one point lined up potential replacement directors in case the situation could not be resolved satisfactorily. It ultimately took the direct intervention of a highly respected and experienced filmmaker, who happened to be married to one of the film's producers, flying out to the production location specifically to help mediate and ease the mounting tension between the director and studio leadership. The director himself later spoke candidly about this period of creative friction, acknowledging that vigorous debate and disagreement between himself and studio executives during the filmmaking process, while certainly stressful at the time, ultimately pushed everyone involved to fight harder for what they believed would make the final film stronger. Framing the conflict as a natural and even healthy part of bringing a challenging, personal story to life within the demanding structure of a major studio blockbuster. Adding yet another layer of complication to an already turbulent production schedule, filming had to be paused and later resumed due to a combination of unpredictable weather conditions affecting the various outdoor locations being used, along with scheduling conflicts tied to Hugh Jackman's other professional commitments, including promotional obligations connected to an entirely separate film project he was involved with at the time. These delays pushed portions of principal photography further into the schedule than originally planned, meaning that the production had to shift its filming base to Vancouver in Canada during the early months of the following year in order to complete the remaining sequences needed to finish the story, a transition that required yet another significant relocation of cast, crew, and equipment partway through what was already proving to be an exceptionally demanding shoot. On the technical and visual effects side of the production, the filmmaking team relied heavily on sophisticated matte painting techniques to bring several of the film's most visually ambitious sequences to life, particularly for the film's climactic finale, which required depicting the sprawling and heavily damaged landscapes surrounding the fictionalized nuclear facility referred to within the story as 3 Mile Island. The visual effects team responsible for these digital matte paintings created multiple distinct painted backdrops specifically for the pullback shot used during the film's climactic conclusion, blending practical set elements filmed on location with digitally painted extensions in order to create a sense of massive scale and devastation that would have been essentially impossible to achieve through practical filming alone. Similarly, for sequences set within fictionalized African locations connected to Logan and Victor's mercenary work prior to their recruitment into Team X, the director personally provided reference photography of real-world impoverished urban settlements to the visual effects company responsible for recreating these environments, ensuring that the digitally created backdrops carried a sense of visual authenticity appropriate to the weight of the story being told in those sequences. The film's musical score also represented a significant undertaking within the overall production, composed by an accomplished film composer who had previously collaborated with the director on an entirely different acclaimed project years earlier, with the two men having first connected personally at an awards ceremony dinner where they found themselves seated together despite both being nominated for separate projects that particular year. This earlier personal connection ultimately led to a professional collaboration on X-Men Origins, Wolverine, with the composer bringing on a specialized cellist to perform distinctive musical passages throughout the score, lending the film's action sequences and more emotional character moments a distinctive sonic identity. The recording of this orchestral score took place on a dedicated scoring stage located directly on the studio's own production lot, utilizing a full orchestra of nearly 80 musicians combined with a substantial vocal choir numbering around 40 singers, representing a significant additional investment of both time and resources dedicated specifically toward giving the film's emotional beats the appropriate musical weight and grandeur befitting a major studio blockbuster production. Turning now towards some of the more lighthearted and genuinely entertaining behind-the-scenes stories connected to the making of this film, One of the most frequently retold anecdotes from the production involves Ryan Reynolds' very first day working on set as Wade Wilson, opposite Hugh Jackman. Reynolds has recounted on numerous occasions over the years how he arrived on set that day still feeling the effects of jet lag following a long overnight flight, and after wrapping the day's filming, which included a complex action sequence set inside an elevator involving Wade Wilson deflecting a barrage of gunfire using his swords, Reynolds found himself second-guessing his own performance as the adrenaline and jet lag began to wear off. Almost as a passing comment while packing up for the night, Reynolds mentioned offhandedly that he wished he had another opportunity to reshoot the sequence now that he was seeing it more clearly in his mind. Rather than simply brushing off this comment, as many established stars might reasonably have done on their very first day working alongside a newcomer, Hugh Jackman immediately sprang into action, personally asking the entire crew, including the lighting technicians and every other department involved, to head back into the elevator set and redo the sequence right then and there. With absolutely no hesitation from anyone involved in accommodating the request. Reynolds has since described this moment as a genuinely humbling and unforgettable display of generosity and leadership from Jackman, crediting this experience as the true foundation of what would eventually blossom into a close friendship and creative partnership between the two actors that would continue for well over a decade afterward. Amusingly enough, despite this extra effort put into reshooting the elevator sequence, the scene itself has since gone on to become widely regarded as one of the most unintentionally ridiculed and mocked moments in the entire film, with Reynolds himself later poking further fun at the sequence's absurdity within one of his own later Deadpool films, turning what had originally been an earnest attempt at improving the scene into an ongoing inside joke shared between the two actors and their fans. Another frequently shared piece of on-set humor involves a light-hearted and clearly joking exchange between Jackman and Reynolds that occurred years after filming had wrapped, during a press event where Reynolds playfully crashed an interview session Jackman was conducting for an entirely separate film. During this exchange, Reynolds jokingly asked Jackman, with mock seriousness, whether the studio had given him any notes suggesting that the lead character of his new film should perhaps have his mouth sewn shut and shoot lasers from his eyes, an obvious reference to the widely mocked transformation of Reynolds' own character into the silent, multi-powered Weapon 11 toward the end of X-Men Origins, Wolverine. Jackman, playing along with a completely straight face, responded that he hadn't received such notes, but thought it sounded like a genuinely great creative idea. The exchange continued when Reynolds relayed a supposed fan question asking whether Jackman had actually worn specially designed shoe lifts during filming specifically to appear taller than one of his co-stars, to which Jackman, again maintaining an entirely deadpan comedic delivery, confirmed that yes, this was true, but insisted with mock seriousness that the decision had been made purely for important story and character reasons rather than any concerns about relative height between actors. This kind of good-natured, self-deprecating humor surrounding the film has become a defining and consistently amusing part of the ongoing public relationship between Jackman and Reynolds over the years, with both actors seemingly more than happy to look back at the more questionable creative decisions made during the original production with genuine laughter rather than defensiveness. The tension between Reynolds' fondness for Jackman personally and his genuine frustration regarding how his character was ultimately handled within the finished film has also produced some of the most entertainingly candid public commentary from Reynolds over the years. During one particular interview conducted years after the film's release, Reynolds jokingly placed the blame for the film's poor critical reception squarely on Jackman's shoulders, referring to the entire production as an absolute disaster while simultaneously praising Jackman warmly as one of the very first major movie stars he ever had the opportunity to work alongside early in his own career. This particular blend of genuine admiration mixed with playful mockery has become something of a signature dynamic in how Reynolds discusses this film publicly, treating the production's shortcomings as a shared inside joke between himself and Jackman rather than a source of any lingering resentment. Reynolds has gone even further with this ongoing bit over the years, incorporating a direct reference to the character's disastrous depiction within one of his later solo films, where a mid-credits sequence humorously depicts his character traveling backward through time specifically to track down and eliminate the widely mocked silent, multi-powered version of the character from this earlier film. A sequence that cleverly used archival footage combined with stand-in performers to recreate Jackman's likeness for the joke, allowing Reynolds to essentially settle the score with his own earlier cinematic misstep in the most self-aware and comedic way imaginable. Beyond these specific anecdotes involving Reynolds and Jackman, Reynolds has also spoken more broadly and warmly about the overall atmosphere Jackman created on set during that original production, describing the experience of watching such an established star treat every single member of the cast and crew with genuine kindness, intelligence, and remarkable professional discipline as something that left a lasting and profound impression on him during those early days of his career. Reynolds has specifically highlighted Jackman's level of graciousness as something he had genuinely never encountered before within the entertainment industry up until that point, suggesting that this early positive experience working alongside Jackman helped shape Reynolds' own approach to how he would eventually choose to treat cast and crew members on his own productions once he achieved greater creative control and star power within the industry himself. Reynolds has also candidly acknowledged in later interviews just how genuinely difficult the shooting conditions were during that original production, specifically referencing the ongoing writers' strike happening simultaneously during filming as one of the most challenging circumstances he has ever personally experienced while working on a film set, framing it as a shared trial by fire experience that, despite the finished film's mixed critical reception, ultimately helped forge an authentic and lasting friendship between himself and Jackman that neither of them has ever expressed any regret over, regardless of how the film itself was ultimately received by critics and longtime fans of the comic book source material. Taken together, the story behind the making of X-Men Origins, Wolverine reveals a production defined by genuine creative ambition running headlong into a series of serious logistical, financial, and creative obstacles, from an incomplete screenplay being written in real time under the shadow of a major industry labor strike, to international explosives controversies, to significant creative disagreements between director and studio that required outside intervention to resolve. And yet, woven throughout all of these genuine production challenges are equally memorable moments of camaraderie, generosity, and self-aware humor between its cast members, particularly the enduring and endlessly entertaining friendship between Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds that emerged from those demanding shooting conditions and has continued to provide fans with genuinely funny public moments for many years following the film's original release, eventually culminating in their long-awaited, proper on-screen reunion many years later. X-Men Origins, Wolverine occupies a fascinating and layered position within both American popular culture and the broader history of superhero cinema, standing as a film that intentionally weaves its central character's fictional journey through more than a full century of genuine historical conflict and social change. Unlike many superhero films that exist largely within a contemporary or loosely defined time period, this particular film roots its narrative directly within specific, real-world historical events. Using Logan's extraordinary healing ability and unnaturally extended lifespan as a storytelling device that allows audiences to witness one man's personal journey across some of the most significant and traumatic chapters of modern history. This approach gives the film a cultural weight and historical texture that distinguishes it from many of its genre contemporaries, positioning Wolverine not simply as a fantastical action hero but as a kind of eternal witness to the defining conflicts that shaped the modern world. The film's opening historical sequence places young James Howlett within the social and economic landscape of 19th-century Canada, a period defined by rigid class structures, colonial-era estates, and the kind of quiet, insulated wealth that characterized certain segments of Canadian and British colonial society during that era. This setting allows the film to establish Logan's origins within a world of privilege and propriety that stands in stark and deliberate contrast to the violence and chaos that will come to define the remainder of his extraordinarily long life. From this relatively genteel beginning, the film's decision to send Logan and Victor Creed directly into the American Civil War carries significant historical and thematic weight, situating its characters within the defining conflict of 19th-century American history, a war fought over the fundamental question of slavery and the moral character of the nation itself. By placing two Canadian-born characters within this distinctly American conflict, the film subtly gestures toward the long historical tradition of Canadians crossing the border to fight in American wars, while also using the brutal and often chaotic nature of Civil War combat to establish the visceral, hand-to-hand violence that will define much of Logan's subsequent history. The film's historical montage then advances into World War I, a conflict that fundamentally transformed global warfare through the introduction of industrialized trench combat, chemical weapons, and a scale of mechanized slaughter that had never before been witnessed in human history. By depicting Logan and Victor enduring the mud, gunfire, and horror of trench warfare, the film taps into a well-established cultural understanding of World War I as perhaps the most psychologically devastating conflict of the modern era for ordinary soldiers, a war whose brutal futility has been extensively documented and mythologized within literature, film, and historical scholarship for over a century. The choice to show two immortal, healing characters surviving this particular conflict raises an implicit and quietly haunting question that runs throughout the entire montage sequence, namely what psychological toll such repeated exposure to industrialized death and suffering might take on individuals who cannot escape through death the way their fellow soldiers around them constantly do. World War II occupies a particularly significant place within American cultural memory, often remembered and mythologized as a unifying moral conflict in a way that many subsequent American wars have not been, framed within popular culture as a clear struggle between good and evil on a global scale. By including this conflict within Logan's historical journey, the film taps into this powerful cultural narrative while simultaneously using the sheer scale and duration of the war to further emphasize the passage of time and the accumulating psychological weight being carried by its two immortal central characters. The final war depicted within this extended historical montage, the Vietnam War, carries an entirely different cultural and historical resonance within American memory compared to the two world wars that preceded it. Unlike the more unified moral narrative surrounding World War II, the Vietnam War remains one of the most historically contested and culturally divisive conflicts in modern American history, remembered for widespread domestic protest, deep public disillusionment with military and governmental authority, and profound uncertainty regarding the war's underlying purpose and justification. By choosing Vietnam as the conflict during which Logan and Victor's partnership finally begins to fracture, with Victor's escalating brutality against civilians pushing Logan toward his eventual break from military service entirely, the film uses this historically fraught and morally ambiguous war as the appropriate backdrop for its central character's first major ideological and moral divergence, mirroring the broader loss of national moral clarity that Vietnam represented within American cultural memory. Beyond its direct engagement with specific historical conflicts, X-Men Origins, Wolverine also inherits and continues a much deeper thematic tradition embedded within the entire X-Men comic book franchise since its earliest origins, namely the use of mutants as a broader metaphor for marginalized and persecuted groups throughout history. The original X-Men comic book series was conceived during the 1960s, a period defined by the American Civil Rights Movement, and its creator has spoken directly about how the mutant concept was deliberately shaped as an allegory for the fear, suspicion, and hatred faced by those who are different from the perceived societal norm, drawing thematic parallels to the discrimination faced by Black Americans during that turbulent era of American history. Within this broader thematic framework, the X-Men comics have often been understood as reflecting two competing philosophical approaches toward achieving equality and acceptance, with the character of Professor Xavier historically associated with a philosophy of peaceful coexistence and integration reminiscent of the nonviolent approach championed by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. While the more militant and confrontational philosophy of Magneto has often been read as drawing inspiration from the more assertive and separatist ideas associated with figures like Malcolm X, whose own adoption of the letter X as a replacement for his birth name carries an additional layer of thematic resonance with the mutant world's own use of the X designation. While X-Men Origins, Wolverine focuses more narrowly on one individual character's personal journey rather than directly exploring these broader societal themes of prejudice and persecution in the way some other X-Men films have done more explicitly. The film still exists within this larger cultural and thematic tradition, and Logan's own experience of being feared, experimented upon, and ultimately weaponized by human authorities within Stryker's secretive program can be understood as an extension of this broader metaphorical tradition regarding how societies have historically treated those perceived as dangerously different. The film's central plotline involving the Covert Weapon X program and William Stryker's ruthless experimentation on mutant subjects also taps into a long-standing cultural anxiety surrounding government secrecy, unethical scientific experimentation, and the exploitation of individuals in the name of national security or military advancement. This particular narrative thread resonates with genuine historical concerns that have periodically surfaced throughout American history regarding classified government programs that have, in various real-world instances, involved questionable or outright unethical treatment of vulnerable individuals in pursuit of military or scientific objectives. While the film's depiction of Weapon X is obviously fantastical in its specific details involving mutant powers and indestructible metal skeletons, the broader emotional resonance of a covert government program exploiting individuals under the guise of patriotic duty and national security taps into genuine cultural anxieties that have persisted throughout American popular consciousness for decades, giving the film's central conspiracy plotline a level of thematic grounding beyond its more fantastical superhero elements. From a broader film industry and cultural history perspective, X-Men Origins, Wolverine holds a particularly significant place as one of the earliest examples of a dedicated superhero spin-off film built specifically around a single popular character extracted from an existing ensemble franchise. Released in 2009, the film arrived during a pivotal transitional period within the broader superhero genre, situated chronologically between the conclusion of the original X-Men trilogy and the beginning of what would soon become an absolutely dominant era of interconnected superhero cinematic universes throughout the following decade. In many ways, the film's attempt to build an entire feature-length production around exploring the backstory of a single supporting character from a larger ensemble cast anticipated a storytelling and business strategy that would soon become enormously influential and widespread throughout the entire film industry. As numerous other studios and franchises began developing their own character-focused spin-off films and expanded cinematic universes throughout the following years. Despite the mixed critical reception the film received upon its original release, its historical significance as an early experiment in this now common industry practice remains notable within any broader discussion of how the modern superhero film genre evolved throughout the late 2000s and into the following decade. The film also holds a particularly unique and somewhat ironic place within the broader cultural history of the Deadpool character specifically, given how significantly its controversial portrayal of Wade Wilson would go on to influence the future direction of that character's cinematic journey. The intensely negative fan reaction toward the film's decision to transform the fast-talking, fourth-wall-breaking mercenary into a nearly silent, multi-powered hybrid creature by the film's conclusion became something of a defining cultural moment within superhero fandom discourse during that period, frequently cited in subsequent years as a cautionary example of a studio fundamentally misunderstanding what made a beloved comic book character resonate with its dedicated fanbase in the first place. This cultural backlash directly fueled years of persistent advocacy from Ryan Reynolds himself, who had grown genuinely passionate about properly representing the character during his time on this production, ultimately contributing to the eventual creation of a separate, tonally distinct Deadpool film years later that embraced the character's irreverent humor and comic book accuracy in a way this earlier film had not. This later film would go on to become an enormously significant cultural and commercial phenomenon in its own right, fundamentally reshaping industry assumptions about what kind of superhero content could achieve mainstream commercial success, including proving that R-rated superhero content could draw massive box office numbers, a lesson the industry had previously been quite hesitant to embrace. In this sense, X-Men Origins, Wolverine holds the somewhat unusual cultural distinction of being remembered as significant not primarily for its own creative merits, but rather for the cultural backlash it generated, which in turn indirectly gave rise to one of the most commercially and culturally significant superhero franchises of the following decade. Within the specific context of Wolverine as a character, this film also holds considerable cultural importance for how it helped further cement Hugh Jackman's decades-long association with the role in the eyes of mainstream audiences worldwide. By the time this film was released, Jackman had already portrayed Wolverine across the original X-Men trilogy, but this film marked the first time audiences saw him carry an entire feature-length production as the sole central lead character, a significant marker in the broader cultural narrative of Jackman's own personal and professional identification with this particular role. This film represented an important stepping stone within what would eventually become one of the longest continuous single-actor portrayals of any major comic book character in cinematic history, a streak that would continue for nearly another decade following this film's release before eventually concluding with a widely acclaimed and much more critically celebrated final Wolverine-focused film years later, creating an interesting cultural bookend narrative where this earlier, more critically maligned origin story would eventually be followed by what many consider one of the finest and most emotionally resonant superhero films ever made, both films nonetheless remaining connected through Jackman's singular, career-defining commitment to this one character across nearly 2 full decades of his professional life. The film's treatment of Logan's romantic relationship with Kayla Silverfox and the broader emotional throughline involving loss, grief, and vengeance also connects to much older storytelling traditions within Western literature and mythology, drawing upon deeply familiar narrative archetypes involving a warrior or hero figure whose personal tragedy propels them toward transformation and eventual confrontation with the forces responsible for their suffering. This kind of revenge-driven origin narrative has deep roots within countless cultural traditions and storytelling forms throughout history, and by grounding Wolverine's transformation into his more iconic adamantium-enhanced form within this kind of classically resonant emotional framework, the film attempts to tap into storytelling patterns that audiences have found compelling across many different cultural and historical contexts throughout human history, even as the specific execution of this particular narrative received considerable criticism from both fans and critics upon the film's original release. Considered altogether, X-Men Origins, Wolverine represents a genuinely fascinating cultural artifact when examined through a broader historical and thematic lens, a film that ambitiously attempts to weave its central character's fictional journey directly through more than a century of authentic historical conflict, while simultaneously carrying forward the X-Men franchise's long-standing thematic tradition of using mutant identity as a broader metaphor for marginalization and persecution throughout history. Its troubled production history, its significant cultural backlash regarding the treatment of a beloved supporting character, and its ultimately significant if indirect role in shaping the future direction of an entirely separate and enormously successful film franchise all combined to give this particular film a cultural legacy considerably more complex and layered than its mixed critical reception upon initial release might suggest to casual observers looking back on the broader history of modern superhero cinema. If you enjoyed this deep and detailed exploration into the cultural and historical dimensions of X-Men Origins, Wolverine, make sure to like this video, share it with fellow fans of the X-Men universe, and subscribe to the channel for more detailed breakdowns just like this one.